Good evening. This is the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for January 15th, 2019. Our first hearing is a variance scheduled for 6:30 this evening. Applicant is seeking permission to construct an addition to a pre-existing non-conforming lot for property located at 177 Center Street. Can you read the notice and we'll go from there?
Easton Board of Appeals will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, January 15th at the Easton Town Hall, Colleen Corona Boardroom, 136 Elm Street, Northeastern. On the following petition, 6:30 p.m. Variance, Craig and Meredith Goldberg, property located at 177 Center Street, Northeastern, Mass. For a variance pursuant to Easton Code Book, Chapter 235, Zoning, Section 235-22, variance required in Appendix B, Dimensional and Density Regulations, variance as follows. Applicant seeks relief from dimensional and density regulations to construct an addition on a pre-existing non-conforming lot. Comments. I have a comment from the Planning and Zoning Board dated today. And it says, on January 14th, 2019, the Planning and Zoning Board voted not to recommend variance 18-17 for 177 Center Street. The board found that the significant amount of dimensional relief requested could have been reduced in part or in its entirety by a different design approach given the shape of the lot in question, as well as the location of the septic system. The board felt that no hardship existed and was troubled by the precedent that would beset the variance was granted. The board noticed when reviewing the documents submitted by the applicants that the proposed addition violated the height bylaw per Appendix B, Table of Dimensional and Density Regulations. The application does not request a variance from this section of the bylaw. The board feels strongly that allowing the proposed addition to violate the height bylaw would be in opposition to the purpose of revising the bylaw, which passed unanimously at town meeting in 2016. The Zoning Board of Appeals were to grant the setback variance as depicted. The Planning and Zoning Board asked the height bylaw not be granted a variance in this instance, nor in any revised application.
Anything else?
This is Board of Health. This says Board of Health unable to determine if bedrooms will be added. If so, a new septic system will be needed. Fire Department, no issues. Environmental Planner, no comments. Water Division, no comments. Affordable Housing Trust, no comments. Police Department, no comments. Historical Commission, no comments. That's it.
Do the applicants want to come up from here? If you can just grab the microphone, introduce yourself, and then we can go from there.
My name is Craig Goldberg, resident of 177 Center Street. I'm joined by my wife. In light of information today, we would like to withdraw our application without prejudice.
Okay. Any questions? Yeah, it does. But anybody have any questions or anything? Anybody want to make a motion?
Motion to withdraw without prejudice, as requested.
Second. Seconded by Mr. Marlin. Any discussion? All those in favor? 5-0.
Thank you for your time.
1 minute. Yeah. Everybody have an opportunity to review the minutes for the October 16th, 2018 meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
Does anybody have a question? Would anybody like to make a motion to accept them?
I'll move to accept the minutes from the meeting.
Motion made by Mr. Kern, seconded by Mr. Cook. Any discussion? No? All those in favor? 5-0. Minutes accepted. All right. 6:35 hearing, a special permit, number 18-18, applicant is seeking permission to allow the premises to be used as a kennel for property located at 50 Washington Street. Mr. Clerk / Vice Chairman.
50 more. Here we go. Easton Board of Appeals will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, January 15th in Easton Town Hall, Colleen Corona Boardroom, 136 Elm Street, Northeastern, Massachusetts, in the following petition. 6:35 p.m. Special permit. Julie Cardoza, Wagging Tail Dog Services Incorporated, for property located at 50 Washington Street, Easton, Massachusetts, for a special permit pursuant to Easton Code Book, Chapter 235, Appendix A and H, Section 6, In section 235-56, applicant seeks permission to allow the premises to be used as a dog kennel. This notice is also available at masspublicnotices.org. Comments? Let's see, Board of Health, is this going to affect the outstaging of dogs? Please be aware there is a neighborhood right behind this address. Noise nuisance could be a factor. Environmental planner, no comments. Affordable Housing Trust, no comments. Police Department, no comments. Historical Commission, no comments. A note from the Planning and Zoning Board dated today. On January 14th, 2019, the Planning and Zoning Board voted to recommend special permit number 18-18 to allow a kennel facility located at 50 Washington Street with the condition that the applicant provides mitigation for a noise reduction barrier such as Acoustifence or similar product to be installed in the outdoor perimeter fenced areas. The applicant is reminded because of the change in use, they need to apply for site plan review. And that is the entirety of the comments.
Okay. If the applicant wants to come up, sit, and just so everybody knows, sitting on this hearing to my far left is Mr. Ed Watson. To my immediate left, Mr. Ryan Cook. To my right, Mr. John Curran. And to his right, Stephen Marley.
Good evening, Chairman Spillane, members of the board. My name is Adam Barnowski. I'm with Roberto Israel and Weiner, 255 State Street, Boston, Mass. To my right is Julie Cardozo. She's the owner and operator of Wagging Tail Dog Services, Inc.
Yep, Scott Farrier from Holmgren Engineering.
So yeah, we are here on an application for a special permit relative to the operation of a doggy daycare at 50 Washington Street. The property is located on in northeastern off of Route 138. It's on the corner of Washington Street and Coolidge Street in the Business Zoning District. It's approximately 200 feet from the CVS and Roach Brothers Plaza off of 138. The current use of the property is a single-family home, which has been in a state of disrepair for a number of years. The proposed use of a doggy daycare is classified as a kennel under the zoning bylaws. The use is allowed by a special permit pursuant to the Table of Use Regulations in Section 235-56 of the zoning bylaw. So before getting into some of the zoning elements and some of the legal standards of this application, I thought I wanted to discuss a little bit about the character and the nature of the business. You know, I find that sometimes when we come before these boards, there's a focus really on the criteria without a little bit of context as to what this is. So, you know, while it's a kennel use, I think you'll understand a little bit more about this business with some context. So, there's a lot of families in town here and in surrounding communities. During the day, parents go off to work, kids go off to school, and what most people have is they have a family pet. But what they don't have is someone who will come and take care of that pet. And that's not just somebody who comes to let the dog out, let it back in, leave 5 minutes later. It's somebody who can socialize with the dog, exercise it, make sure its well-being is taken care of, and really be active to that dog. And that's really what Wagging Tails is all about. So it's a carefully crafted family business. It's been in business since 2014. And this is really the way it works. In the morning, they'll come to your home, they pick up your dog. At the end of the day, they come back, they drop your dog off. There's no pickup or drop off at the facility. And in between, your dog is carefully looked at, it's exercised, it's watched over, it's socialized. And it really doesn't start there. A huge part of this business operation, in talking with Julie, I have a dog myself. I take it to a similar location elsewhere in the state. And it's really critical to have a good onboarding process. The onboarding process is really critical to make sure that the environment at the location is what the business wants it to be. So they have a 10-point inspection. They want to make sure that the dog is obedient, that there's no aggressive behaviors, that it's compatible with other dogs there, it's compatible with staff. And only dogs that pass that 10-point exam are allowed in. You can't have one aggressive dog with a bunch of friendly dogs. It does not work. So that's really a critical part of their business, and they take that very seriously. And that really goes into the rest of their business. A typical day will start around 8:30. There are 4 vans that will be on site. They will go off site, pick up dogs, bring them back in phases. The dogs will go inside. There's going to be three zones on the interior of the property. It's going to be one zone for small dogs, two zones for standard sized dogs. And when they come into the building, there's going to be areas for them to rest, socialize, and play. They spend much of the day inside. When they're taken outside, again, there's also three zones rather. Small dogs, two for standard dogs. And they're taken outside at one phase at a time. And this is all fenced in area away from 138.
How large is the fenced-in area on the outside?
The three of the areas are roughly 40 by 100 feet. Each separate area is 40 by 100.
Three separate areas, 40 by 100?
Each 40 by 100. The small dog area is a little smaller, not just because the dogs are smaller, but just because they needed some room for the vans to drive up and have a secure drop-off spot.
So is the green the fenced-in area?
Yes, the light green is the fenced-in dog area. The rest of it is just
So to the bottom of it, what's it to the south of that? To the bottom of it, I guess.
right here.
Yeah, the property. What property is directly next to it? Where your finger is?
Right.
Is that a single family home?
No, it's a business. It's a business. The single-family homes are behind us on Kenneth and on Calvin as well, and
Okay.
across the street. But no, it's a business on Washington Street.
I can't interrupt and ask questions. They humor me by letting me do it, so.
I interrupt all the time.
But while you were on that topic, I wanted to pinpoint it.
Yeah, so I mean, and it's very relevant to the presentation, and those are the areas off of Washington Street there, and outdoor play it's structured. Again, this is all each phase of this operation is well thought out. It's crafted, so it's structured play. It's exercise. The dogs go out to relieve themselves, and you have one person per 10 dogs out there with one floating supervisor that's not assigned to any specific dogs. An important part of this outdoor play is that when the dogs do use the bathroom, there is waste. The waste is picked up immediately. It's picked up, it's disposed of. That disposal is then taken off-site by a professional waste disposal company twice a week. A little part of this really, and the way that you know that the waste is being accounted for and watched over is part of the process that they have there is, and some of you might be familiar with it, it's actually a lot like child's daycare, where you have an app on your phone or your computer, and you're notified really when your dog shows up, when they're dropped off, when they use the bathroom, if it's number one, if it's number two. There's a lot of information out there. So again, this is it's something that it's highly supervised.
Is there a number of dogs did I miss it or it's not in here? The number of dogs that you were looking to put in this premises?
So right now, at Wagging Tails' current location, there's 25 dogs. This space is built for much larger than that. I think it's anticipated that they could phase in over time up to 60 dogs, but that would be in phases of 20. So 20 in each of those zones that we talked about. And I think it's important to let you know that there would be 20 dogs per zone, and that each zone would be let out at one time. So outside, you'd have a maximum of 20 dogs at one time. And we think that that's important. Again, it's important.
How long do dogs stay out at any one time? Does that depend on the weather or the dogs are having a good time? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I would defer to you
Yeah,
on that.
we'll probably rotate them every 30 minutes. Also, depending on weather. If it's like a really cold day out, they can't stay out too long. So it'd be between 15 and 30 minutes each group.
So you're Julie, right?
Yes.
I'm Steve.
Nice to meet you.
So does that mean that there's always dogs outside? So dogs come out for 30 minutes and the other 2/3 of them are inside. Group A comes inside and Group B goes outside?
I have 3 indoor areas, so they all don't have to be out at the same time. I mean,
But no,
there
I'm
doesn't
asking
always
you,
have to be one
are
room.
there always going to be dogs outside, assuming the weather cooperates?
If it's a bad day, they'll be inside and they'll be outside for a bathroom break. So
Yeah, but if it's good weather, what I'm asking you is, 1/3 of the dogs always going to be outside?
yes, if it's good
Okay.
weather.
I want to make sure.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, when I'm asking questions, that doesn't mean I'm taking one side or the other. I'm just trying to get the overall picture of what we're doing here. what you're asking us to do.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, or I may have mentioned this, it was in the legal memos provided to the board in the application. But Julie is under a purchase and sale for this property. In the event that she's able to get her permits and approval, she will buy the property. So she won't just be a tenant there. She'll have full site control, which we do think is important for a facility like this. If changes have to be made, there doesn't have to be an extended approval process. She can make them right away. The hours of operation are going to be Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5 p.m. This facility is not going to be opened at night. It's not going to be opened during the weekends. The weekends there might be people on site for office work and things like that, but there won't be dogs on site during the weekends.
What about the ancillary veterinary service?
Yes, ancillary veterinary service might be
Is that
open on the
also
weekends as well.
35? Is that different hours?
The vet service that you might have on.
Oh, the transporting?
Well, if you have an ancillary vet service on site, would that be during the normal Monday through Friday, 8:39, or would that be after hours or on the weekends?
Probably Monday through Friday.
So during regular hours of operation.
Okay, and that requires cars to come in and out off the premises for the vet services, independent of your pickup of the doggy daycare or whatever we want to call it.
Correct.
Okay.
That would be a carve out. There's not generally pickup or drop off to the vet service, although it's anticipated that most of the dogs that are using the vet service are already clients and customers there. So in that case, it would be used in the van pickup and drop off. So I mentioned I bring up a lot of that background because, as I mentioned in the beginning, we're looking for a kennel use. But when a lot of people think about kennels, they think about commercial boarding, commercial breeding, things of that sort. So that's not what this is. This is not a traditional boarding. It's not a traditional kennel. A kennel is a little bit of an archaic term, and it predates this kind of a use, like many of the use provisions in most zoning bylaws in the Commonwealth. And so I bring up some of the operational ideas so you get a sense of what benefit this is going to be bringing to the community. As I mentioned, we do have a legal memo that I provided to the board. I won't recite it verbatim, but we do go through a lot of the special permit criteria under 235-56B. I do feel as though this use meets and exceeds a lot of those threshold requirements. The social, economic, and community needs are met. Again, there is a big demand for this kind of use within this community and others. People have dogs. People need support for their dogs. The traffic flow and safety, including parking and loading, there are plenty of parking spots on site. We don't anticipate using all of them, even with the amount of staff and vans that are on site. 138 is well traveled. We don't anticipate that this is going to be a large traffic impact to the community, particularly considering what other uses would be allowed there by right and might have much more impact to traffic. On item number 3, the adequacy of utilities and other public services, there is an existing on-site septic system, and the public services are sufficient for the proposed use. The neighborhood character and social structures, it's consistent with the existing character. This is an existing building. They're not looking to add on to this building. They're really just looking to update it. It really needs some updating, but it's consistent with a lot of the other single-family homes that are on 138, although it is in the general business district. Impacts on the natural environment, as described in the presentation, we do have a well-designed plan to professionally collect and dispose of solid waste. We don't anticipate there will be an adverse impact on the natural environment. And as far as the number 6, the potential fiscal impact, including impact on town services, tax base, and employment, we don't require any additional town services. Julie and I have discussed this at length about employing locally. She currently employs locally in the community where she operates, taking some students for part-time work from neighboring universities. And with that, happy to answer any questions the board might have. Thanks.
Ed?
Yeah. Just for a reason of clarification, you had said that your disposal of waste would be an immediate pickup, whereas in your paragraph C, it said it would be routinely collected. Routinely collected mean immediate?
So routinely, that was probably referring to the waste disposal company.
No, that's my second question. In here it says weekly, and you had actually said bi-weekly.
Okay. Well,
So
that
I'm just wondering.
I think we
Just
can
for clarification.
Yeah, we can stay for the record that it is picked up at the time that it occurs. That might
Okay.
have been an oversight in the legal memo.
Okay, and the waste is picked up by the duty calls waste service twice a week?
That's correct.
What's the maximum number of dogs?
So the maximum
there
that
a
we'd be
maximum?
looking the maximum that we're looking for would be 60.
Okay, so there's no maximum number listed in here.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But you're looking for a maximum of 60.
That would be if the business is highly successful.
What's the least number of dogs that would make it economically feasible?
You're looking for somewhere between 50 and 60 on a consistent basis. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Right?
I mean, there's just a general question, but there's nothing as far as kennels. It says sort of like where we have restaurants and it's square footage, parking, or number of patrons. There's nothing in the zoning bylaws that I remember seeing designating how many dogs, how many square foot, how much room there is per dog, all that other sort of stuff.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
I just wanted to double check, make sure I didn't miss something. No, I mean, it's the same applicant that had attempted to purchase a property across from Fernandes, and I'd asked all my questions then. I don't have any others.
Yeah, thank you. I do have a couple, and I guess just to kind of follow up on your point. First of all, during the presentation, I believe you said that the maximum number of dogs would be 60. When I was going through the material, and I think this was actually your Exhibit 1, under the heading Facility, it said that the anticipated number of dogs to be cared for on premise at any one time is 65. Is it 60 or 65?
60.
60, okay. And actually under that, since I'm on that particular document, under again that heading of facility, there's a discussion about a calming room, and the last sentence in that particular paragraph says that, quote, there is only one cranky dog allowed at one time in the calming room. My question would be, what if you have two cranky dogs? What kind of a accommodation or adjustment are you going to make if you have more than one at the same time?
So that was 1 dog per room. We're gonna have 2 calming rooms, and in the calming rooms, there's actually gonna be salt lamps, which calm them down, and classical music playing. So they can, if they get a little bit rowdy, we'll take them up there and we'll calm them down. And they'll calm down. There'll be a couch that they can lay on, and they'll just relax for like 15 minutes. And I find that very successful. And then they can go back to play, and they're a lot better.
And I'm sorry, what kind of lamp did you say that was?
Salt lamp. They're like the natural, like people use it. Yeah.
I have no idea what you're talking about, but maybe I should
It
get
works.
one for myself.
Yeah, it works.
Save the target.
Yeah.
I'm writing it down.
Yeah. Google it.
And excuse me. Now I'm again just jumping back to something that I read in the legal memorandum. You outline the 6 criteria that have to be met for. Well, I shouldn't say have to be met. I mean, it's, in other words, is the use consistent with the criteria? And there's 6 of them. You touched briefly on neighborhood character and social structures. What is it about the, and you referred to the fact that it's on, I believe, and I'm kind of paraphrasing some of this, on Washington Street, there's a commercial business next to it, but it also borders on a residential area. And how would you say that this proposed use meshes with a residential neighborhood such as borders on this particular property?
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great question, and in looking at this property as far as this proposal goes, I looked pretty deeply into your zoning bylaws, the zoning map, and it's an interesting business district because it really runs north and south, really just along 138, and bordering 138 on both sides are almost entirely residential zoning districts. So I think the idea when this zoning ordinance was enacted was some thought that there would have to be some harmony between the businesses operating in the business district and the residences that are operating in adjoining zoning districts. I think that this home is an interesting one in that it is located within the business district, but it's a single family home. As far as this business goes, I think that operationally, it's going to operate like a business, but that it's operating within the home will not have a severe impact into the character of the neighborhood. So that those driving by it or living in the neighborhood won't be driving by a large commercial facility that might otherwise be allowed in the zoning district. Certainly, that there are a lot of uses by right that could come in, purchase the property, demo the structure, and build a business use that wouldn't have to come before the purview of this board and wouldn't be required for site plan approval. So I think that having, especially with a site plan approval before the Planning and Zoning Board, that is going to take into consideration a lot of the characteristics with design around this site. So that's a long way of saying that we think that the design elements will work well with it. Having fencing, a single-family home, having dogs on the exterior won't be inconsistent with what you might see in a residential district.
Well, and to kind of follow up on that, the Planning and Zoning Board, in their when they considered this and voted to recommend it, did refer to a noise reduction barrier, the acoustic fence. Is that something that you're committed to putting in as part of this project?
Yes.
And what would that look like? How tall would the fence be, and what does the acoustic fence device? I'm not sure I know exactly what it is, but what does that device look like, and how does it reduce noise?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly how it works. What I know what it looks like is it's put on a traditional chain link fence, and I believe that they come in different kinds of colors, but it's basically a barrier that sits within the fence lining. So it's almost like a hash marked material that's within the fence. And I guess it's my understanding this is a very popular device to use with dog kennels, doggy daycares, because it does prevent sound. I think that the recommendation is generally an 8-foot fence, but it does in some way prevent sounds from carrying. And I think the idea here is that the 10-point inspection, dogs do bark, right? But the idea is that you find dogs that are well behaved that don't bark all the time. So this is not a situation where you're going to have a group of 20 dogs out there barking. I think that the fencing is similar. I could be wrong, but I did look at some of the special permits. There are other kennel uses within the business district in this community. They are also on Washington Street, and I believe that the condition of at least one of those special permits had a somewhat similar condition regarding sound mitigation. So if now that you could look at it right now at this point in time, but if you're curious, I'm sure you could go by one of those institutions and see what that might look like, or we'd be happy to provide pictures.
Sure. And the fence then that you anticipate putting, because there is no fence right now, correct? Would be 8 feet high.
I was looking for 6 feet.
I may have
That would
misspoke.
depend on the site plan, Mr. Chairman, right? That would be up to the planning board, assuming you've got test us.
Okay. I don't have any other questions at the moment.
I have one more if I might.
Go ahead, yep.
Is there some type of national kennel standard or mass kennel standard saying how many dogs you can have per square foot in a building? Does anyone know that?
I'm aware.
No, it's just like crated. Like they have to be able to turn their own crate, but they're never going to be crated with us.
So in room A, you have 1/3 of your dogs not crated, so they're running in the space.
Right. They're playing.
Room C, right?
And what are the dimensions of those rooms?
Do we have them laid out? The dimensions of the rooms? I don't know that we have the dimensions of the rooms laid out yet.
Okay.
I would anticipate, well, that might not be part of site plan approval. We can certainly provide that documentation. I
Okay.
think wasn't the idea that two of the rooms on the first floor, one in the basement, was that it?
The basement's going to be split in half. So there's two big rooms in the basement, in group 1 and group 2, and then the living room upstairs is going to be for the small dogs.
Okay.
Just reiterate, it's 9 to 5 of the proposed hours.
8:30 to 5.
And when you let dogs out, and you say you're doing it in stages, what are the maximum number of dogs that will be out at one time?
20 dogs.
Where is the access egress and doors going to be?
There's two front doors to the property, so that would be the access to the owner's hut. But for the dogs, that would be this gray area here. There'd be a series of walkways for the dogs to get into the basement level.
And yet from the house to the outside. So when the dogs are coming out, where are
The
they
dogs
coming
are
out?
coming out, they would come out to the basement level along this gray walkway into the fenced areas.
Okay.
Basement's the ground level in the back.
Okay. And before someone had told me that the property at the bottom of the map was commercial, but you know, it has a residential ownership name. That's 52 Washington Street.
50.
No, yours is 50 is the property, but the one on the bottom is 52.
My house is right behind it, it's 18 Calvin Road.
Hang on.
Property.
Right there.
I just
52
wanted to know, to clarify whether that's a residential property or a commercial property.
It's a business. I'm not sure what business it is.
Okay.
I don't know the parking lot and accounting from there. The parking lot right there, close to the well.
Halsey Agency or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else right now?
Okay.
Nope. Okay. Anything else right now? I don't have anything right now. So what we'll do is we'll turn it over to members of the public that would care to speak. If anybody does want to speak, I'm going to ask you to come up, use the microphone, introduce yourself, name, address, and then you can fire away. If you have questions, direct them to me, and if it's appropriate for the applicant to answer, I'll ask her to do so, or her counsel, and we'll go from there. So whoever wants to go right ahead. Sure. You can just put the microphone back up there, and we'll do this the best we can.
Take it loose, probably.
Yeah, probably easier that way.
My name is Nunziata DePaul. I live at 18 Calvin Road. My house is located on the corner of Kelvin and Kenneth Road, and 50 Washington Street is right behind my house. I don't know if you could show me on the map where.
It's right on the corner there, correct?
Oh, yes, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
This isn't very deep. This, for me, it looks deeper than what it really is. It's not. I don't know they can't tell you the footage, but from the back of my house to the back of this house isn't that deep. So when I'm in my backyard, I'm pretty close to our property line. I also wanted to mention there's a doggy daycare called Home Away from Home that's at 54 Washington Street. That's just 2 buildings up from 50 Washington Street. And I had heard that they were also looking to expand, and that's not as close to my house, but also very close to our neighborhood and just wanted to know what it feels like a lot, particularly if there's going to be 60 dogs here and a number of dogs there. I'm someone who's home most of the day. I'm retired, and one of the things I'm thinking, I mean no disrespect to anybody, but I thought it was going to be 20 dogs and was worried, and hearing 60 dogs and wondering if I'm even going to be able to sit in my backyard in the nice weather. But I had some other questions. Yeah. I wanted to know if there were any town or county requirements for a business like this so close to residences, because it is really close to my house and to my next door neighbor's house.
Unfortunately, as the applicant's attorney said, this is in a business district. So they are asking for a special permit for this use. It's not a by right use in this area. But there are other businesses that are by right uses, and to the applicant's attorney's point, any one of them could come in and start operating there without our approval, without a hearing, and so forth. So the extent that there is a requirement on this type of a business, it's this. It's our job to decide whether or not the applicant should be awarded a special permit for this use. Okay.
Are there any, so there's no land size requirements for?
No, there's nothing that, and we did discuss that a little bit. There's no requirement on either the number of dogs or land area for this particular use that anybody has made us aware of.
Are there any feet requirements for my lot line from where the dogs would be?
In what sense?
I guess I can't really tell from that. It looks like, are the gray ones the fenced in areas for dogs?
The green area.
Oh, the green areas are, okay, and the gray here?
Is a driveway.
So I think is that gray area there is where the vans will come in, drop off the dogs, and then the dogs would go into the house from there. Is that fair to say? Okay.
So this is the front of the house?
Yes.
And this is currently an open, just a grassy area? This is just a backyard. This is just grass. So is this going to be asphalted?
Yes.
So there'll be people coming in onto, this is Calvin Road, so they'll be coming onto Calvin Road and turning in here.
Correct.
Okay, it's, again, this, just visually, my house is much closer to this than it looks. It's very different to have
Understood.
a road there.
I understand.
I didn't realize it was going to be paved over and have people coming in. You mentioned there would be a privacy fence. Is that all the way along the lot line? That would be this whole thing? Okay.
And just let me clarify one thing with the applicant to maybe address one of your concerns. The vans come in basically at 8:30.
No, they come in at 10.
At 10, so they leave your property at 8:30. They come back with the dogs around 10.
Yes.
And that's the only time that they're in and out, so to speak.
They come in at 10 and then they leave again around 11 and then they come back for half day, which is like 12:30.
Dogs come back and forth, so there's a
Yeah.
whole day versus a half day.
Right.
Okay, all right, that's fine. I don't think we had talked about that. So, okay.
Will this also be a residence, or this is just going to be a business?
My understanding it is business only, and that you have no intention of having anybody reside in the property. Correct?
Correct.
And I was going to ask about whether or not the building would be soundproof.
You can address that if you care to.
No, I mean, there haven't been any plans to soundproof the actual building. I mean, the applicant has to work within there's a nuisance bylaw in the community. I mean, that's what, we think that this is actually probably a good thing, that there's a certain amount, there's a decibel level in which Wagging Tails is going to have to operate from within. And, as I'm presuming that that would be a condition of any special permit granted, that they would have to comply with that noise ordinance, and that there would be some sort of relief in the event that, we don't think that there's going to be an issue, but if it was an issue, that we would have to work with that. In that case, I mean, sound mitigation would be necessary, but at this point, based on, I think, Wagging Tail's current operation, it doesn't seem like it would be necessary, considering the kind of dogs that they're bringing on site.
okay if I just look at this one?
Absolutely.
And if I may, so just in the event that this does pass, I mentioned to the board that this plan is subject to site plan review, and that's going to be through the planning board, and a lot of the elements you're talking about with the design and how this would be structured is within the purview of that planning board, the site plan, and I think that the idea here is to be good neighbors, so that if, you know, I can give you my card, if you don't provide any information, then we'd be happy to speak with you as that hearing comes up, which will probably be in the next month.
Thank you.
Hi, Diana Williams. I live at 123 Sheridan Street in Northeaston. For full disclosure, I do work with counsel for the applicant, but I'm here in my capacity as an Easton resident and a longtime client of Wagging Tails. I've been a client of Wagging Tails since July of 2015 when I first brought home my Wheaton Mix Charlie. I've used Wagging Tails consistently for walks, half-day and full-day daycare, transportation services, positive reinforcement training, and even a scenic 3-mile borderland hike, which they offer. As someone who is obsessed with their dog, I did a lot of due diligence in searching for a place to bring her. I work very long hours, I have a long commute, and I don't want to worry about her when I am at work. I can truly say, after looking at a lot of places, that Wagging Tails is a really unique place. It offers a real benefit to Easton and its residents. That's why I've strongly recommended it to friends and family, and that's why I'm here today. Just to give you a few examples, Wagging Tails consistently employs Easton residents, full-time and part-time, and they offer jobs for Oliver Ames and Stone Hill students, which I think is a real benefit. It gives them a lot of experience before they enter the workforce on their own. Therefore, I think that Wagging Tails, it will not only assist Easton residents who work and need a place to bring their dog, but it also helps residents with employment opportunities that can be hard to find for especially younger individuals in Easton. Another point is Wagging Tails, they offer pick-up and drop-off services. And I don't know if it was clear, but they only offer that. You can't drop off your own dog. So they pick it up on a schedule, they drop it back off on a schedule. For me, that is particularly valuable, and I think it would be for other Easton residents. Because I don't have to drop my dog off, I don't have to rush. I don't have to be worried to rush home from work to make a specific time. I know that my dog is being dropped off because they tell me on the app that they picked her up, and then they tell me on the app, they use Time to Pet app, that they've brought her back. They give me all sorts of information so I don't have to worry, and they usually include pictures as well. And so I think that is a huge benefit because, you know, we don't have to rush. We know that she's taken care of. And because they do the pick-up and drop-off service, I actually only have to send my dog for a half day, which saves a lot of money in the end. So again, I think that's a great benefit. A lot of places in the area, some offer drop-off and pick-up services, others don't. Most of them you have to pay extra for, and it's not something that's just included. Lastly, Wagging Tails has a very high employee-to-dog ratio. So there are a lot of employees with their eyes on the dog. I believe that it's one employee for 10 dogs. And then on top of that, there's a manager who is looking over everything. So there are a lot of eyes on the dog. And they also separate the dogs by size and by temperament. While this seems obvious, a lot of places don't do this. And I've been to facilities where they, you know, put all the dogs in one area and, you know, hope everyone gets along. So I think that this ensures that all the dogs are watched very closely and that all dogs, whether big or small, old, young, hyper like my dog or timid, they have a safe and stress-free environment. Counsel for the applicant has provided I think, ample reason why the conditions for a special permit have been met. So I don't need to go into detail for that. And why the benefits outweigh any negative effects. Again, this is Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. There's fencing, soundproof fencing, and privacy fencing, so that it won't bother the neighbors. They're going to do as much as they can for that. And there won't be anything at night or on the weekends when most people are home in the residential neighborhoods. You know, I thought it was important to speak as somebody who has been a customer for many years, and knows how it operates from an outside perspective. I think that it's a really special place, and it would be a great asset to the town. And I hope that you guys approve this request and allow Wagging Tails into Easton.
Thank you.
Chairman, I have a question.
Sure.
Can I ask? Maybe Julie can answer or something. So what happens if you have one dog owner in the family, and someone works in Boston or something and doesn't come back in time? What do you do with the dog if that person's stuck in traffic or whatever?
So we offer dog walking 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. where we go right to the house and we take care of the dog out of their house.
And just to go on that, I guess if it helps, they have an app, so you can, and they're very quick to respond. If I'm in Boston, something comes up, I'm stuck at work, I can message them in the app and ask for a late walk or ask for Charlie to go a full day instead of a half day, and they respond right away. So it's very user friendly, and it's very convenient for Easton residents who are working and have things come up. I've had emergencies and I've had to have somebody go attend to my dog, and they've always come through.
Is that usually done at your home?
When they do walks, they'll come to my house and walk the dog. I have siblings that use this. I have friends, I have neighbors that all use Wagging Tails now because I've recommended it so strongly. So there'll have been times when I've okayed it, and I'll let my dog get dropped off to my sister's house if I'm not around for the weekend or something. So as long as I think they have consent, they're pretty flexible with what works for us.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Sure.
You've been in business 5 years?
Yes.
And in Sharon on Main Street?
4 years in Sharon.
And is that a similarly zoned area in Sharon?
It's
Yeah,
it's a
zoning?
farm.
Okay.
Not sure of the zoning. I read from the landlord, so he knows more about that.
How many dogs do you have there?
25.
You have 25 dogs there, and have you ever had any noise complaints while you've been there?
Nope, and there's
In the
a
whole
neighbor.
5 years?
Yep, there's a neighbor right next to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else in the public like to speak? Sure, come on up.
Would not be me if I didn't say anything. Mark Cardos of Julie's dad, 78 King Arthur Road. One thing I want to point out, and I'm glad you asked, there has been no complaints. There was a reason why I'm nearsighted. There's a reason why we have minimal complaints, and you touched base on it, and Diana touched base on it a little bit. It's the vetting process. Not just any dog can go to Wagging Tail Dog Services. We have multiple services. We have the daycare, but we also have home walking. So if your dog doesn't fit daycare, we offer an alternative. So what's important is a 10-point checklist. And when Julie goes and does a meet and greet to meet the dog and the owners, here's some of the questions she talks about. Does the dog accept the evaluator without aggressive behavior? She gets down on her knees. She sees how the dog approaches her. Does the dog fear the evaluator or a stranger? Are they tough to talk to? Are they skittish? It all comes into play as to what type of service the dog needs and where the dog would fit into the daycare. Is the dog young, frail, or old and frail? That's important to know. Is the dog on any medications? Does the dog have health issues that may prohibit them from daycare? Is there health issues? Are dogs' vaccinated shots up to date? They need proof of all this, and it goes on file. What's the special needs for the dog and owner, if any? She has clients that are nurses that work third shift. So they go and pick up the dog and they bring them home. So it fits, we try to fit their lifestyle. Based on the size and temperament of the dog, is their space in the desired time frame. She limits the amount of dogs that she can bring in at a particular time frame. So if you're asking for half-day dog daycare, that might be full based on the temperament, and you might have to go onto a waiting list, or it might have to be delayed. Well, that doesn't mean we don't service them. That means we have to put them on dog walking at their home until we have a space for them. So it's a limited. It's not one of those daycares where we just load dogs in. We don't do that. It's a very secured. We have a model that we follow. Is the owner willing to agree and accept the emergency protocol? We have an emergency protocol that they have to sign off on. If something happens to the dogs play. They might bite each other's ear. They start bleeding in the ear. If they don't have a veterinarian, we have 2 vets that we transport the dog to, so they have to meet the protocol. Does the owner agree to accept the terms set by Wagging Tails Dog Services? There's a whole things that they have to agree to before we can accept them. Now, if Julie, during that preliminary, that's just the meet and greet, during that preliminary meet and greet, if she feels that the dog is questionable, then it goes into trial day evaluation. How long does it take for the dog to interact with other dogs? So the dog comes to the daycare and we evaluate them. Is the dog aggressive or passive? Does the dog play roughly or softly? Does the dog warm up to one particular dog? They make friends. Is the dog scared of a particular dog or object? So these are all the evaluation process, and the dogs will get along together better if they're playful. They still bark when they play, but it's a better bark. Results of the outcome. Based on the initial meeting of the day's evaluations, dogs will be accepted or need another day of evaluation to determine the outcome. Sometimes they go on, okay, and there's sometimes they get rejected. Or be better served. They may be better served by having the dog walking service. There are some dogs that don't get along with people or other dogs. They're aggressive. There's some dogs. We have a 17-year-old dog. I mean, we can't send her to daycare. So if we go away, we have to somebody come walk her and let her out. So that these are all the important things when she evaluates a dog. Some dogs need time to orientate into the social environment and walks at home. And it's just a matter of understanding the dog, understanding the concept, and understanding how they fit in and what part of the concept they fit in. Another thing we didn't talk about here is she has supervision. The dogs are outside, but they're not outside alone. They're supervised. Each particular area of section has at least one person in it supervising the dogs. And that's important. So if the person sees the dogs getting rambunctious, they go into a calming room. Calming room, what she said. Music, couch, chill out. And the property, even though you only mentioned 1 or 2 calming rooms, the property is large enough to probably put 4 or 5 calming rooms. But again, with the proper vetting process, there should be minimal calming room necessary because we vetted them properly, we've categorized them, and it should flow properly. And in 5 years, we have had no complaints, and because of this vetting process. It's very important. And the other thing is it minimizes the rambunctious of the dog, and that just makes the whole operation run smoother. It's not only important for the dogs, it's important for the employees too. We don't want employees to get bitten. We don't want any problems. We're trying to minimize problems. We want to interact with the social environment. We want to interact with the neighborhood. We don't want to be an advocate, not an adversary. So that's important to understand. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say, and I wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm still concerned about the capacity. I live right there, and for me the space for 60 dogs, even though they're only out 20 at a time for each different areas, I don't know the square footage, I don't know if there's a way for someone in the town to just look at the actual size of the property and the square footage of what it would be for animals, because it just feels tight. And I just want to know for my own house, my house lines up straight with that house, that drawing is just not correct. They're much closer than it looks like. And it's not just me. I'm part of a residential development with 55 houses, and many of us are older and home all day.
Excuse me, can I? Val is the current owner of the property at 50 Washington Street. He just made a comment to me that was very important. Can you share the comment?
Most of the cages that they're making there for the dogs are farther away from where she lives. If you look at
The fenced-in areas where the dogs will be outside.
Yeah, if you look at
Okay.
on the map there, it's
Yep.
farther away from her house.
Could I see the map?
Sure. Come on up.
At 1 Kenneth Road,
Come on up.
Lorraine, Caledonia. I haven't seen this, so I'm just curious. I can't say anything. I don't live there, so I only own the property. So.
Okay.
But I understand where the neighbors is concerned.
Fair enough.
Move we close the hearing if no one else wants to speak.
Before we get there, does anybody have any other questions for the applicant? And does the applicant have anything that they wish to add?
I actually have one more question.
Go ahead.
How's the procedure handled? Like, I mean, I have a dog, and sometimes my dog gets really rambunctious, likes to play and starts barking a lot. And generally, I'll say, "All right, come on, time to come in." But how do you generally handle when, I mean, if you're gonna have 20 dogs out at a time, when one or two start really barking like crazy? What's the process?
Well, if we have 20 dogs out at a time, I have 2 people out there, and then 1 person supervising everything. So if one dog starts to bark a lot and we find that he's getting a little out of control with barking, my manager will take that dog and bring him into the common room and calm him down.
Any other questions for you, John, Steve?
No.
This probably seems silly, but what makes dogs bark? I mean,
Squirrels?
seriously. No. I mean, the noise component is something serious. I mean, and you know, maybe we've all had experiences with neighbors that have more than one dog, and the 2 of them are in the backyard, and they start howling, and you know, I understand. It's like apples and oranges. I'm not comparing your situation to that, but you know, I could never really get a sense of what was making them make all that noise. I mean, and if you have 20 dogs in a fenced-in area, I mean, in your experience, is there something that will prompt them to all start making a lot of noise all at once?
We don't really have that problem now where they make noises all at once, but we do, like, they'll do a play bark, but I'm a dog trainer also, so I teach them to say quiet, and I teach my employees, teach them quiet, and they'll quiet down. We give them Cheerios as treats, so then they learn. A lot of the dogs come to me 3 to 4 days a week, so it's a lot of the same group. I've been working with a lot of these dogs for 5 years, so I know which ones is going to bark at which one, and we can separate those in different groups. So I haven't had really a problem with it in the 4 years I've been there.
Okay, thank you.
Before you start, just one quick follow-up question. Are you planning to close your location in Sharon and relocate it in Easton, or is this a second location?
I'm closing in Sharon and relocating in Easton.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Ellis, 50 Washington Street. The present owner. There's a dog kennel 1 house over, 2 houses over. Don't hear any noise from them. I hear more noise from people across the street and behind me opening and closing their doors than I do the dogs. And for the information, there's been a business there since 1971.
Next door to you? Or?
My business.
Yours.
And that's about it. No problems hearing dogs next door.
Thank you.
I wasn't going to say anything, but since you brought it up, Andre, those 54 Washington
Can
Street.
you just grab the microphone and...
54.
No, it's for the television.
Okay, 54 Washington Street. My wife and
your
I,
name was?
Andre Tovstucha.
Okay.
And I'm the current owner of the Home Away from Home Pet Boarding, which is
two doors down the street.
Okay.
And we've been through this process about 8 years ago. And the reason, the neighbors not hearing noise, we went through a very rigorous process as well. And part of it is the soundproofing. So we actually have like 3 layers of soundproofing. That's, sometimes it's 12-inch wall construction for the noise. We do boarding, so we operate on weekends as well. But that's one of the reasons, we make sure that, and I mean, we know Julie, she's a really good person. So, I mean, I don't really have any, concerns. I just wanted to make sure that, what standards we had to go through to satisfy the neighborhood. I mean, we followed it through the town requirements, so I'm sure, if whatever town requirements will be, I'm sure she will do a good job. So
that soundproofing, that acoustic fence is the same
No,
product
well,
you're using or something similar?
the acoustic fence, I'm talking about the building soundproofing. We actually limited per our permit of how many dogs we can allow outside, because in reality, I mean, I've done a lot of research on sound waves and everything else. I mean, what stops the fence really, it's a wave, so it just goes around the fence. So it does limits it, but it doesn't really stops it. Right. So in our case, we had to limit the number of dogs we were allowed to go outside, but the building is fully soundproofed.
How many dogs do you have? How many go outside at any one time?
Well, we can allow, we are a smaller facility, so ours is limited. I mean, we're not doing 20, but I would say groups up to 10 maybe. But again, if they are rambunctious, we'll bring them back in, just like she mentioned. So.
Thank you. Come on, one more. Grab the mic first.
Otherwise, no one can hear you in TV land.
We surveyed when we first looked at the property. Julie and I surveyed the neighborhood. We went around handing out flyers, introducing ourselves, and we went to your house. We put a flyer at your door, and we tried to talk, but we didn't. We never got to meet. But what we did get is that there is other sounds in the neighborhood that are upsetting the neighbors, and they're not coming from kennels. They're not coming from you. They're not coming from anywhere else. There happens to be a rental property in the area that's creating a lot of noise. We'll leave that to where that is, young people. So that's all I want to say. And that's one of the annoyances behind your house.
So, anybody have anything else they'd like to add? No? Does the applicant wish to say anything? No. Mr. Merlin, would you like to renew your motion?
The motion, we close the hearing.
Anyone want a second?
I will second.
Motion made by Mr. Merlin to close, second by Mr. Cook. Any discussion on closing the hearing? All those in favor? 5-0. All right. Hearing is closed. That means no more, unfortunately, comments or questions or anything from members of the public. So now it's our turn to deliberate.
Can I make a motion to get the discussion going, please?
Go right ahead. You start.
Okay, so the motion is to approve, ready Suzanne? Hours of operation Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5. No overnight boarding. Noise barrier as required by the planning board. No pickup and drop off of dogs on site. 50 dog limit. That's my motion.
So before anybody seconds it, let's have a discussion on whether or not, if people have any questions, comments, concerns, or if they want to convince Steve to make a different motion.
Curious what you think of the 50 number, because the applicant said, I think that's the minimum I need to be profitable. That's really not of our concern. It's beyond our purview.
I'm concerned about the number of dogs on premises.
50
As
versus
60 versus 65, and that was information for me to make sure that the business is viable and we also control the number of dogs on premises. Because if 1/3 of the dogs are going out at any one time, 50 is 16 dogs at a time versus
16 versus
16
20.
versus 20,
Mm-hmm.
and the plan said 65, although they're saying 60 here. So I'm taking 4 dogs off the number of dogs that might be outside at any one time. Like I said, that's for discussion purposes.
I still don't see what that's within our purview. The applicant is asking
Well,
for 60.
I mean, we can.
And we
the applicant
can
has
change
asked
the
for
number,
60.
but
Um,
I think the 50 number is arbitrary. If she had said I need 60 to be
There's
to be
actually no number
profitable,
in the application.
no, but I know, but they asked for or advised that it would be a maximum of 60.
Just because they asked for 60 doesn't mean we have to grant
Understood.
60.
I understand that, but
So I gave you my rationale for the motion.
and I disagree.
Okay, that's fine. See what else anyone else has.
I mean, if we're talking about the difference between 16 and 20, that's 4 dogs. You know, I mean, I'm not sure that that particularly matters. That's just my own.
Precisely.
My own. You know, 16 is still a substantial number. If there's concerns about that many animals in an area at any one time, I think the same concerns would apply if it's 16 or 20. So I'm not sure that I mean, we have to put a limit on it. I mean, you know that there has, you know,
You don't
I mean,
have
there has.
to. You
Well,
don't
we don't have to
but-
actually, and that was the point that was made. Is that there, oddly enough, there's no regulations in terms of density. I mean, you know, it seems counterintuitive, but you could, you know, it doesn't seem like there's any law that would prevent somebody from putting 100 dogs in a small little house. I mean, at least in terms from a zoning point of
I
view.
mean, outside of taking a kennel and making sure they can spin in a circle, and you line up all the kennels side by side and see how many you can fit into a property. I mean, which is a ridiculous standard.
Right. So
that's why we should limit it. Whatever number it is. But if we're going to allow it, there should be some limit in the special permit.
Sure.
Ed? Thoughts? Anything you want to add?
Not right now.
Okay. Well, for me personally, I think given the presentation the applicant has made, I don't necessarily have a concern that we are, if we're granting the special permit, that the use is not going to be professionally run, and I tend to agree with Ryan and John too, that I think limiting the number of dogs to less than what was requested tends to be somewhat arbitrary, and I don't know what that magic number is.
Right, but there are sound ordinances in place to make sure that so if the residents feel something's not right, they have the right to request
correct
that to be addressed.
And mitigation would have to be
exactly
implemented at that point, and the applicant has acknowledged that. And if it's a reduction in the number of dogs, but it could be 2 dogs that are creating the issue, and
at which point the dog's going to be pulled from the yard.
Right. I'd be probably more inclined to do the 60 myself if we're going to grant it. I'm otherwise in agreement with everything else that Steve had mentioned in his motion.
And I think I'm of the same mind. If we're going to approve it, I don't think getting into a limit, specifying a number less than what's been requested is something that we should be getting into.
So at least.
And I can appreciate where you're coming from, Steve. I don't know what the number is. You know, it's hard to sit here at a board hearing and say 50 is the right number, but 60 is too many. Maybe it's 40, maybe 80 would be fine. You know, I don't know. I don't know, but to Ryan's point, I do agree that there's going to be, you know, avenue for the neighbors and the abutters to take issue with any issues if they're not being handled properly.
There'll have to be enforcement of the noise ordinances that already exist.
Absolutely.
No matter what they were doing, whether it was dogs or whether
Right.
it was heavy equipment or whether it was anything.
Again, and some of this is going back to site plan review. So site plan review could say we want 8-foot fences, we want this much spacing, and all that other sort of stuff. I mean, that's
Since there hasn't been a second yet, then I can amend my own motion since the majority of you seem to want to go with the 60 requested. I'll make it 60 instead of 50 in the motion.
And otherwise, everything you stated in your motion previously the same? Okay.
Same. I think I got all the conditions that I wanted. Does anyone have any other conditions?
No, I mean, should you recite them again? Just.
Suzanne, you had to ask me that, didn't you? Let's find that page where I scribbled everything.
Just be clear on what we're.
Okay, so I've got 5 things here. Hours of operation Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5. 2, no overnight boarding. 3, noise reduction barrier as approved by the planning board in its site plan review. 4, no pickup and drop off of dogs on site.
By customers.
By customers.
By customer, yeah.
Okay, that's a good addition, John.
Because they obviously have to.
They're coming with the van, yes. Okay, and number 5 is 60 dog limit.
So that motion has been made by Mr. Marlin.
I will second.
Seconded by Mr. Cook. Any further discussion? All those in favor? 5-0. Congratulations.
No.
He made
Yeah.
the motion. he
Yeah.
voted.
Okay, no, she didn't see me vote. You guys gotta sign those.